Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your co-host, Peter Schrappen. I see Mark Manziel popping up there. Hi, Mark. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Peter. Good evening. You made it. I was afraid you'd be off watching the debate.
You know, let's just say I think I'll be watching that later tonight. But yeah, may you live in interesting times, as the proverb goes. And there's a lot going on tonight. But we're so thrilled to have a big show tonight. We've got a nice crowd forming as well. So yeah, it's episode 23, Mark, October 22nd. Happy National Nut Day to you.
National Nut Day. Interesting. Peter, you are just full of information.
I do a little bit of prep. I just don't, hop in the chair and away we go. It's also National Croc Day. And are you a croc wearer, Mark, on the boat?
No, I'm not a croc wearer.
You don't do the
croc
thing?
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I find those to be a pretty good boat shoe.
They are.
Yeah, it works well. What's new in your world?
Well, let's see. Leonard and Lorena are going to be joining us in a moment, and we're kind of practically living together on telephone and internet as we have 1 week to go for the Wagner Guide before we hit the button and it goes off to the press. So we're a little bit on pins and needles, but it's all coming together nicely. So nice. That's what's the main thing in our world. We didn't get a chance to do any boating, although I've been dealing with boat maintenance issues. And I think we're going to have a future show on corrosion. I'm dealing with corrosion issues on my boat. So I'm investing some money with the marine trades this week.
We thank you for that.
Yes.
And we've got a big show tonight. How does the show look tonight?
Well, we've been talking about all kinds of different topics related to boating. I mean, we've covered seasickness, we've covered pump out, and one that also comes up is insurance. And we've got an excellent guest tonight who's going to talk to us about some interesting facets and things we should know about insurance and don't always. And he's got some great videos to show us of some boats that unfortunately have run into trouble. And it fits into our theme. This really is not ever going to happen to me. And unfortunately, sometimes it does. So Peter Ricks will be with us in about 15 minutes after we go through the updates with Leonard and Lorena. And why don't we segue right to that?
Dive right in.
Landons, what's happening out there in the boating world?
Well, you described it, what's happening. We're staying up late at night and and on the phone and finding things that needed to be updated and making calls and out there. So not boating, but working on the Wagoner. So, but we do have some other things. So
sounds like other boaters are getting out there. The shoulder season has extended longer than usual this year. Roche Harbor tells us we're very busy through September and into October, so boaters are still out there. Kingston also had a great shoulder season. At first, they had to cancel, of course, their rendezvous when COVID started, but then things picked up and boaters stopped there on the way up to the San Juans and on the way back, so they had a great shoulder season as well. And, they said they were full Thursday through Sunday, completely full all of the time. So that was fantastic.
And then they said their season totaled out at a little bit less than it was last year, but that was because the slow start on the beginning of it. They did talk about how busy they were, and that again, that they saw the same boaters many times that were headed up to the San Juan Islands, came back, and they repeated that process several times heading up to the San Juan Islands.
That's great.
We also talked to Long Branch down in Falusi Bay on South Sound. Just kind of wanted to get a picture, because living up here in the Anacortes area, we saw that it was busy up here this season. So again, in the recap, we wanted to kind of understand what did South Sound look like? We were there several times. We went early in the season and then kind of in the middle, but not right in peak August season. So it was curious. We were curious to know when you were all done with the season, how did it come out? And Long Branch was interesting. Katie talked to her there at Long Branch, and she said it was very busy. She said they set a new record in August for busy. And the one that got my attention, she said one night in August, we had two 80-foot boats in Long Branch. And if you've been to Long Branch, I could not visualize, I could not figure out where you put two 80-foot boats in there. But that is underscores how busy it was there. She said the shoulder season definitely is busier. And another one that she said, one of the firsts is that they already have a winter group, not a large group, but a group meaning a small group of boats already have reserved for a winter cruise in February. So this is becoming one of those things. It's something that got started a number of years ago with a boat guy over in Paulsbo. And it seems to be something that's definitely gaining some momentum. And certainly this year, busy as it was in the shorter season, looks like we're going to do that. So
more news from BC. They too had a great boating season. They were actually 104% of last year. So BC boaters were out there enjoying their own backyard waters. Desolation Sound was busy for that. And then we have some correspondents who live in BC, and they have a family member in Haida, and they gave us a report. They say the ferry from Prince Rupert is still making 3 trips per week for locals and freight only. Pacific Coastal Air is flying in Thursday and Sunday from Vancouver to Masset, again for essential service workers and medical care only. And the Haida have become more assertive in their requests that non-islanders not visit Haida at this time. So that's the latest there. Roger and Andrea are our correspondents up there, and so we appreciate their report. And that's it for updates.
Yeah, just to reinforce what Lorena said, we were worried about many of the different marinas as to whether they would have enough business to survive. And it's just great to hear. And those of us on the American side of the border think that we're so critical to their business up there. And quite frankly, the Canadian boaters kicked in this year and as Lorena said, filled in. And so the marinas, they not only did okay, they exceeded some of their numbers from last year. So this is telling us also that years forward, it's going to be even more important to make your reservations and honor them, please, that we just have a lot of boats and a lot of new boats out there on the water, and moorage is going to be tougher to find. So we'll be...
That was, by the way, that was something that Katie had talked about. She said on Long Branch, she was seeing quite a few more new boaters and boaters that were new to South Sound. Indicated that there are, again, a number of new boaters, younger boaters out there, just characterizing something that we're seeing in other places too.
So the one additional thing on the Canadian side is, we always report that age-old question we get asked every week: when is the border going to be open? And in the last week, the Canadian government came out and said, well, we're going past the October 21 deadline, which they did. And the new deadline is November 21. Now, as I reported last week, the Prime Minister was more forthright when he said he didn't think the border was going to open at any time soon. And at least until the numbers in the US go down. And I have to say, the numbers are creeping up in Canada also. Canadians are getting nervous about this. And we're also hearing some Canadians are concerned that they're not able to visit their vacation homes in Palm Springs and Arizona. So we're not the only ones that are our vacation time getting restricted.
I can keep an eye on those vacation homes if that's a problem. Just let me know, Canadian friends.
You'll be happy to help.
I'm a man for others, Mark.
that you are. That's
I've got a couple of government affairs updates for you, Mark, if I could slip those in.
yeah, please do.
Working on an Andrews Bay issue that's popped up. If you know where Andrews Bay is by Seward Park here, it's the only overnight anchorage in Lake Washington. And the tomfoolery that's occurred this past summer has caused some consternation with the neighbors that reside in that area. So they have reached out to their city council member, Tammy Morales, and she held a community meeting last night. And so Doug Levy, the Recreational Boating Association of Washington lobbyist, and myself, along with some other boaters, made the case that we can improve the situation, maybe looking at permitting some buoys. It does seem that the neighbors are saying it's the Wild West out there. And as you know, we're longtime advocates of safe boating and mandatory boater education. So we will not have a problem trying to increase the safety atmosphere there. So that's one issue that I will keep my eye on. And the second popped up today. I got a call from the governor's office, John Snyder, asking about sailboat racing. And they're looking to issue guidelines. And does he need to issue guidelines? And the short of it is that they have no plans to issue sailboat racing guidelines. It's currently allowed, and I think it's one of those issues that be careful what you wish for. We'll just keep a low profile on that one. So if you are a sailboat racer, go out there, do it safely. But yeah, don't look to the government to tell you how to go about that, which is a good thing in my book. So yeah, that's my brief update.
Well, we appreciate your representing us, Peter. Seriously, we need it because we've seen in the past, sometimes these regulations creep in and
Sometimes.
a lot of times we read
Yeah.
the next day in the newspaper that, somebody who really doesn't understand boating, yes, trying to do the right thing, but they've instituted a new regulation or new law. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
We're going to move forward with this. And first of all, I want to acknowledge our sponsor, the Groesbeck Realty Group. I'll be talking a little bit later about them and some of the listings and so forth that they have available in Anacortes. It's been rather fascinating while they've been a sponsor for us to see the things they put up for sale, not just waterfront homes, water view homes, but also docks and condos on the water and slips. So in Anacortes, you can actually buy your slip and always have a slip available without paying rent, but you typically are paying a maintenance fee for it. And Jean and her associates have a bead on the slips that are available. So if that's something you're interested in, give them a call. You can look at their website, Groesbeck Realty Group, and learn more there. And of course, you can always call our office and we'll be happy to point you there. Okay, with that, we have a very interesting program for you tonight. I'd like to introduce Peter Ricks. I'll give you, and he'll be popping up on the line here in a moment. There you are, Peter. Good evening.
Good evening.
Peter is the Northwest Regional Manager for Novamar Insurance. Oh, there you are, Novamar, right over your head, Peter.
I like it.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
You got busy in the last 12 minutes.
So Novamar is a specialty marine insurance brokerage with offices in Seattle and in California, in both Newport Beach and San Diego, Florida, Mexico. And previously, Peter oversaw nationwide commercial and charter underwriting as a senior charter underwriter for Geico, the marine insurance. And he was vice president of operations for Anacortes Marine, not Anacortes, Anchor Marine Underwriters. Peter has almost 2 decades of experience in the marine insurance industry. So warm up your questions to send them in on the chat line. We've got our true expert here. And in addition to that, and I love this, Peter is pretty active in Puget Sound marine community. He has his own company doing some consulting and other things. He's a 100-ton Coast Guard master's license, and he's also the past Commodore of the Tyee Yacht Club. And Peter is a live-aboard boater. He and his wife, Kathy, live aboard their boat in Shell Shoal, a 52-foot yacht fisher, and they've lived aboard for the last 9 years. Peter, I wish you and Kathy had joined us when we had couples talking about the ups and downs of what it's like to live on board and crew on board together. You two would have been great.
It would have been great. And you hear me okay?
Sound
we
great.
hear you
Yeah.
great.
Excellent. My wife is very shy, usually says, don't put me in a social situation. And then she is the social darling. So she would have been very good at it, at the ups and downs of it, coming from a very large home to basically an 800 square foot apartment that moves, and not making it just a house, but a home, and encouraging other ladies that it can be done with a minimum. You can still be very feminine, all that stuff, and at the same time enjoy the on-water lifestyle.
I think women look incredibly feminine in a good set of Grundon's reindeer. And
Leonard liked it because you can't buy a lot of things. So you can't go shopping. There's not room to put it on a boat.
Exactly. When we were living on the
I
boat,
think-
she'd look at things and I'd say, where are you going to put it? And that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah. That's
Very
why
good.
we had it with couples, both represented, because as you can see, there's 2 points of view. But we're here to talk about insurance. So Peter, fill us in, because the theme of your presentation is, it'll never happen to me.
That is correct, Mark. Thank you for the kind words in the introduction. And insurance is, as you saw in the article that I wrote for the Wagner Online, it's like watching paint dry. It's not very exciting until you actually need it. And I put together a little presentation we're going to go through, and Mark might want to give a disclaimer as we get ready to pop into this. With that, it'll never happen to me. Let me go ahead and get this queued up for you.
Yeah, while Peter's queuing that up, I'm going to just tell you that this is raw video footage of a marine accident. And there is occasionally some foul language that sometimes happens in a disaster. So if you're offended by that, you might want to turn the volume down, or if the kids are in the room, cover their ears. But I know when things like that happen, that you're going to see words slip out. Go ahead, Peter, you can let it rip.
All right. Well, the theme is, it'll never happen to me. And okay, there we go. The sub-theme, are you really covered like you think you are? And this is tailored not to go into deep discussion, but basically so my 8-year-old grandson could understand it. It's a very in-depth topic, but we want to make sure that we as boaters are reading our policies and know what we actually get into before a claim occurs. Preface on this right here. September 15th of 2018, I was fishing about 35 miles off of the Owaco Columbia River. This accident happened 15 miles from us, right off of Willapa. And with that, I'll let it go. It's a little bit.
That fucked. Ah. There she goes. Must have broke the hull. No, it didn't break the hull. How did we get so much fucking water?
Had to done something to crack the, had to crack the transom or something.
Will they come after it?
United States Coast Guard, this is Krusty Krab. We have a mayday.
What's the name of your boat, Rick?
Lady Sechin. Lady Sechin.
Dude, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you for
yeah,
being
shit.
here, dude. That is fucking.
What the fuck? What? Dude, it just fucking one motor shut off and there was nothing. It just.
Pretty graphic when you actually see a boat roll over like that, turn turtle, and sink right in front of you on that video.
The scary part about this whole adventure is that from initial request for help, which was a call to a friend about a mile away saying, "Get over here, I'm having trouble with my port engine," to the vessel turning turtle was 7 minutes. It can and it does happen. This is one that happened last year in Hood Canal. Vessel coming out of Hood Canal, hit an SSO, struck a submerged object. Total loss of the vessel. Operations were normal, skies were clear, an accident happened. 15 minutes from that liveaboard calling to get help to the vessel being a CT, or what's called a constructive total loss. If you take anything from this presentation, it's those 3 words. Please take the time to read your policy. Most people never do, and they don't have any idea what's covered by their policy, with the assumption that everything's covered, and actually everything is not covered in the policy. The magic, that is what's covered and what's not covered, is in how the policy is structured and worded. And if it's not written in there, it doesn't exist. I'm an agent, been, as Mark mentioned, for many years. I can make you a verbal promise, but that doesn't hold water if a claim happens. It's what's in the policy language with endorsements that will either make or break your claims day. So, Vessel Insurance 101, what is it? It's simply risk transference from you, the vessel owner, to the insurance company. You have a vessel. Ours is a 1989 vessel, valuation of about $200,000, and we pay but a fraction of the cost of that vessel to insure it properly for the year. The insurance company takes over the rest of the risk. The types of coverage that are available are ACV, or actual cash value, and we all know what that is. That's a kind of policy that may be on your vehicle, and agreed value. An actual cash value policy operates like your car policy, as that the vessel value is determined at the time of loss, also known as book value. It also is a named perils policy. This means that the policy lists only what is covered by the policy: sinking, stranding, burning, collision, etc. If it's not in the policy, the wording, it's not covered. And often it's what's called a named operator coverage. And so if I go on Mark Bunzell's boat and we go out and I'm operating the vessel with his permission, and we get into a claim situation, but I'm not named on the policy, the policy holder, the insurance company, has the right to deny that claim. Conversely, the agreed value policy means that the vessel value is agreed to at policy inception, and total losses incur no deductible. I mentioned my vessel is insured at $200,000. If we have a total loss, we will receive a check for $200,000 from the insurance company with no deductible or depreciation factored in. It's that agreed value at policy start. It's also an all risk coverage. Rather than have a set of named perils that are covered, the policy covers pretty much everything except those specifically named as exclusions in the policy language. And the biggest takeaway from the agreed value is that if the policy language is silent on a claims issue, the policy benefits the policy holder. If there's any gray area that the insurance company is not too sure whether it's covered or not, due to the policy language, the policy would benefit the policy holder. And finally, permissive use coverage. In that same scenario with Mark, I go on his vessel, I crash it. Permissive use coverage says that the vessel is covered as if Mark were on the helm. Second part of a marine policy, the hull coverage is the first part. The second part is marine liability, also known as protection and indemnity. This is the coverage that protects others from the damage your vessel might do to them, whether it be vessels or docks, etc. It also protects you against legal liabilities or legal actions brought against you, whether they're real or perceived. And coverage should be a combined single limit, not a split limit. And if you look on your policy, it'll say 300,000, 500,000, $1 million. And that means that for one incident, you have up to that amount of coverage for that one incident. A split limit policy will give you a portion of that per incident with a total not to exceed the overall limit. Mark asked for train wreck photos. I can oblige.
That's not the way I drive my boat, by the way.
Pollution. One of the big hot topics that Mr. Schrappen can definitely attest to is pollution is a huge, huge concern in our boating waterways. It protects you financially from pollution damages you cause. from oil, from plastics, and even human waste. Legally speaking, human waste, if you're in a no discharge zone, is also a pollution that you can come under the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 and subsequent amendments. The OPA 1990 Act has just been increased from $939,800 to $997,100.
So Peter, what happens if I dump my 200 gallons of diesel fuel? I mean, how much would that cost to clean up?
Unknown. The Coast Guard would come out, boom your vessel, or the rescue organization, and then they would start the cleanup processes and then do what's called an environmental impact assessment to see if the flora and the fauna had been injured by your discharge. And all of that is tabbed on the vessel owner for that discharge. So it can go up to $1 million or more.
But my coverage is only up to $990,000.
That is
You're right,
correct.
it could go over $1 million.
In theory, absolutely. The last one that I worked on was in the 2006 Gig Harbor fire, where Pleasant Harbor Marina went up, and the average pollution cost for the 56 boats that went down due to the fire was about $30,000.
Okay.
Peter, what are some key differences between auto insurance and boat insurance?
Oh, there's many. Depreciation is a big factor. The ACV, or the actual cash value policy, is what all automotive, less specialty automotive, such as collector vehicles, is based on. So there's a sliding scale depreciation factor that's built in. And if there's a claim, partial loss or total loss, the adjusters will adjust that out based on current market or book valuation. So there's a negotiation that goes on for that total loss of your vehicle that had a tree fell on it, for example. The auto policy also has terms such as collision and comprehensive. In the marine world, we have either total loss or partial loss. We don't dive down into the minutia of something is a collision or not a collision. It's simply a partial loss or total loss.
And for folks at home, we encourage you to use the chat box if you have questions for Peter.
Salvage and wreck removal. So as a vessel owner, we're all responsible to our fellow boaters. And if your vessel goes down, you're responsible to remove that from the event, from the area in the event of a sinking, grounding, or other calamity, if it's salvageable or removable. If the vessel does sink in an area where you can't rescue it, obviously you're not going to be held liable for that. The coverage, depending on your policy, may be limited to the amount of hull coverage or the liability coverage, and it may be inclusive or exclusive. And that means that the coverage for the salvage and wreck removal may be limited to the hull of $200,000, $500,000 of liability, or a portion of that. So if you have $500,000 of liability and $200,000 has been used because of an insurance calamity for that one incident, you have $300,000 remaining to salvage and remove the vessel from the area.
Hey, Peter?
Yes, sir.
Peter? My 20 horsepower rib dinghy. Do I need a completely separate policy for that separate from the mothership?
The general sense is if your tender is used in service to the main vessel only, the coverage would extend. However, if you're using it for, as I do with my 15-foot whaler, not just as a service to our vessel, but to go explore, go crabbing, go fishing, it's wise to put it on its own policy. In my case, my whaler is $35,000 and it's $201 a year for the policy. So it's very, very reasonable cost, and it's the same kind of agreed value yacht policy that I have on the large vessel, even though it's only 15 foot long. Towing and assistance, we're all familiar with the Boat US folks, and they're great folks. That's designed to get you to the nearest safe harbor to effect repairs. It can be used for parts or fuel delivery, excluding the actual parts or fuel. Basically an Uber on the water to come out to you to bring you parts, fuel, etc. and they are always reimbursement type coverages. So you would pay the $200 or whatever the cost may be for that service, and then the insurance would reimburse you 100% for that action. That was me off of Westport coming in when I had a very bad day fishing, but I had very good insurance and it covered everything in total. So it does happen. I've talked briefly about some of the concepts of insurance. Now, putting it all together usually makes things a lot more cohesive and brings it home. So in my example, you own a boat, it's 2004 Meridian 490 insured for $295,000. The book value, the current market value is $172, and you owe $215,000. Not an uncommon occurrence in any situation. At 2 a.m., you get a call. Your boat's burned to the waterline. It's taken out the neighbor's 17-foot whaler and it's damaged the dock. The Coast Guard is deploying oil booms around the wreckage area due to the diesel leaking. During the investigation commences and you are found to be at fault. You are liable. Dock damage is $250,000. Whaler damage, $35,000. But wait, it gets worse. 2 weeks later, you start getting invoices in the mail. Oil cleanup, environmental impact assessment of $332,000. $135,000 in wreck removal. So you've had a very bad evening, and 2 weeks later, you get additional bad news. The question is, how will your policy respond? The answer must be similar to this. You receive a check for $295,000 to cover your total boat loss. In addition, the policy pays $285,000 for the liability to the dock and the whaler loss. In addition, the policy pays for the oil pollution invoice. And finally, the policy pays for the wreckage removal. If your policy response is anything other than what was just shared, or if you're not sure, you need to have a heart-to-heart talk with your agent.
Peter, you had some great advice to me when we talked about this the other day, and you suggested that I go through my policy with a highlighter and try to answer those questions, and also anything in that policy that I don't understand. You suggested I highlight it and then sit down with my agent.
That is correct. As an agent, we're licensed, we're bonded, all those kind of happy terms that says that, and we have continuing education that says that we're supposed to be subject matter experts. And I use the word supposed because there are agents out there that aren't students of their business, for lack of a better term. If I pick up a policy, if somebody has a question, I go right to the source, be able to pick it up, be familiar with that policy language to answer that question, not based on my opinion or my knowledge base, but on what the policy says is and is not covered. In the event of a claim, the only thing that's going to be in that room, so to speak, would be the named insured or the person who owns the vessel, the claims adjuster, and the policy. And the policy will dictate what is and what is not covered.
Peter?
Yes, Mark. Yes, Leonard.
Talk about the personal umbrella policy in combination with the watercraft insurance. Can you speak to that a bit?
I can, sir. An umbrella policy is designed to be exactly that, an umbrella over your personal gear, whether it be a home, an auto, vessel, aircraft, RVs, etc. And it has a trigger point called an underlying limit. So in the case of the example I gave a few minutes ago, the insurance was at $500,000 of liability coverage. An umbrella would dictate what the underlying policies on your vessel, your home, your RV, cars, etc., would have to be before that umbrella would trigger and come into play. So if you have a $2 million umbrella policy, you in essence have a $2.5 million overall protection under the liability coverage. But again, read the policy for the liability side of the umbrella, because there are certain incidents that are not covered by a liability umbrella, such as pollution, wreck removal, salvage. Specific maritime incidents are not covered by that umbrella.
Peter, one of our viewers wrote in on the chat line to ask if you could review his policy with him to see if he has the right coverage. And he names the company, and he mentions, I'm not going to mention on air, and he mentions that it was much cheaper than some of the others. And I think what he's saying is he'd like a second opinion rather than just go back to his initial agent who wrote the policy. Is that something you do?
Yes, sir, it is. We at Novamar, we have our agents all over the country and in Mexico. And part of what we do is to simply have that conversation with the insured, the prospective client or the vessel owner, to find out what their needs are. And in this case, with this gentleman or this lady, this party, having a policy that they want to have reviewed to get that peace of mind, we're more than happy to sit down with them either in the office, telephonically, or via electronic email, etc., to find out what their needs are, how they're using the boat for boating, and then review their policy to see if that policy is matching up to what their needs are.
Interesting. Okay.
There was another question in the chat. Mark, did you see that? Do you want me to ask that? Sue asks, when the legal requirement for pollution coverage increases, does the policyholder have to contact the agent to get that increase, or does it happen automatically?
Very good question. Any kind
Thank
of you're welcome, sir. Any kind of coverage that comes under what is called a betterment clause, that is the insuring company or any kind of federally mandated changes demand an increase to a policy, that betterment is added to any policy automatically without any intervention by the policyholder.
Okay.
So in the case recently, when the pollution went from $939,800 to $997,100, the policy could read $939,800, but it had automatically came under the betterment clause and had that $997,100 coverage automatically included in there.
Peter, a question I asked on an agent a while ago is I said, what if I navigate using a placemat? And I hit a rock because I couldn't see it on the placemat. And the agent at the time said, the whole idea to insurance is to cover stupid mistakes. Are there limits to that? Negligence. Where is the line of negligence?
Okay, that's a great question there. Insurance is designed to cover something that falls under a sudden, direct, accidental physical loss to the vessel or property on board the vessel or damage to others. Somebody navigating with a placemat, because they have local knowledge and they have assurances from their generational knowledge of being in that area, and they hit a rock, they do some damage to the vessel, although it is, especially in this day and age of electronics, they're relatively affordable and do a phenomenal job of keeping you out of harm's way, that would be a covered event. There's no clause in any policy that says that the policy holder must adhere to certain navigation tools such as compasses, polarises, GPS, chart plotters, sounders, etc., to be afforded coverage under the policy.
Okay.
Peter, I brought one of my favorite books with me today. Katie Kirk's The Best Advice I Ever Got. Interestingly, it came out so long ago that most of the people in here are persona non grata for the Me Too movement, but that's another conversation. But what's the best advice you've ever received as a boat owner or someone in the insurance business?
From the professional side or personal side?
Personal side.
Be a student of your craft. When I bought my first large boat down in San Diego, I was coming off a 26 footer to a 33 footer twin diesels, and I had operated them for a little bit in the Navy, but really had no skill set. And I was buying the vessel from a priest because it was his office, 33-foot Bertram. He taught me, like my guitar teacher a long time ago, that slow is accurate, accurate is fast. So don't go as fast. You basically go as fast as you want to crash, and you have no brakes. So in his case, he said, take the time to learn what you're doing, enjoy the learning process, and don't be so excited to get to the end piece of going fishing in this case that you forget about all the rest of the things that you're missing along the way.
Interesting. Peter, in talking to insurance agents this season, and I try to check in with them because we do a lot of training and we do a lot to help people to improve their boating knowledge. And I said, what are you seeing this year? Are claims up or down? And I heard claims were up. And then I heard, what are the types of problems? And it seemed to be more navigational problems. People were striking things in the water. Would you agree with that? Is that what you're seeing?
I would agree with that. About a month ago, Trade Only Today publication came out and stated that boat sales year to year were up 44.5%. And in speaking with one of my underwriters who had just gotten out of a claims meeting, he said claims were up almost 300% year to year. And that's indicative of what we're seeing in the insurance market. A lot of folks very excited about getting into boating because of the COVID situation, and seeing it as a way to socially isolate and get away from the home and not be on the road and in an RV somewhere. However, that same genre of folks who are excited about going into boating are coming from zero or a 19-foot runabout to a 55-foot trawler, from a 16-foot runabout to a 40-foot sailboat, with no relevant experience, but a lot of excitement.
Okay. So a lot of training opportunity.
Very much so.
Peter, can you talk about trip permits? We always appreciate knowing we can get a trip permit when we go outside our normal cruising area, and beyond that, get that extra coverage.
Yeah, the trip permit's like heading up to Southeast Alaska.
Yeah, that would be a good example.
Okay.
Yeah, and also you've Mexico, and we did a trip permit when we did in Mexico too.
Okay. The key to that is always having the policyholder having the conversation with the agent. If you know you're going to go to Nia Bay, take the big left turn and cruise down the coast, port hop down to catch the Q-Bar rally to go down into Mexico to Cabo, that didn't happen on a snapshot. So have the conversation with your agent so that way we can do our due diligence to make sure that your policy will take you that far. And if it doesn't, we can provide alternative policy information to get you to that destination you wish to go to. For trip permits, going up to Southeast Alaska, down the coast, through the canal, etc., it's just a simple conversation. And sometimes it's providing additional information depending on your skill set and how your policy reads.
So I can add to my policy, and again, as you're saying, a central theme, discuss it with your agent.
Very much so. We're definitely, the insurance business is the insurance business, but I was taught, and I take this to heart, that we're really in the people business because we want to help you, the insured, get to their destination. My personal goal, I want to take our vessel, go up to Southeast Alaska and go right up to the Mendenhall Glacier. We've been up there by cruise ship, but I want to take the time to go up there ourselves. Knowing your skill set, making sure that your coverage is where you need it to be for that type of endeavor, is simply starts with a conversation, a quick phone call or an email, so we can do our due diligence to make things happen for you.
But the language that I would be looking for in my policy there's usually a section called geographical limits, and it'll mention how far you can go or not go in a latitude and longitude. For example, 51 degrees would take you to the top of Vancouver Island,
Yes.
which would mean you'd have no coverage when you're in northern British Columbia or southeast Alaska, right?
That is correct. The standard Puget Sound navigation is defined as an area from Olympia to the south, to the 51-degree north line, and to within 25 miles of the west end of the Straits of Juan de Fuca at Cape Flattery. For most folks, that is very, very ample navigation coverage. During a conversation that we have with the insured during the inception phase of the policy or during a follow-on phase, if the desire comes up, hey, I just had one this afternoon where a gentleman is up in Sydney right now, and he's hoping that Canada opens up so we can go ahead and take his vessel off the hard and head up to Southeast about April, May of next year. That's quick conversation, got the notes down. I will be checking with him in the March timeframe to see where his mind is, if they're going to go up, checking the political atmosphere, if the border's open, and then recommending if the border is softened its stance on going across and he's still diligent to go up there, then I'll offer him those options. So when he takes the vessel off the stands in the hard, he's ready to go with the proper coverage.
Peter, you bring up a really good example, and I'm going to do a little twist on that. If I'm not going to take my boat out because I can't go north to Canada and I'm going to leave it in the yard, should I be getting a different downgrading my policy?
The same gentleman that we had the conversation with a few seconds ago about going to Southeast had that conversation with me 3 days ago. His vessel's on the hard. His current navigation is the entire West Coast. And my recommendation was to reduce his coverage from the entire West Coast to Puget Sound, and also add what's called a layup credit, which is adding the vessels on the hard not being used. So that layup credit would reduce the premium, but the coverage would remain in force as long as it's on the hard during that certain time period that he's agreed to for that layup period.
So if I leave my boat in one of the dry storage yards, should I be doing that every winter?
Talk to your agent about it. Some policies do offer it. Some policies factor layup credits into the policy automatically, and they don't have a separate line item to offer you. But yes, if you're putting your boats at not Donato's, Dagmar's up in Everett from October 1 through April 1, and it's truly on the hard asleep for that time period, it's a good conversation to have with your agent that may save you some money because their layup credit might be available.
Good advice. I mean, that could save some real money.
And the nice thing about that is that, as I mentioned, if the vessel is damaged in any way while on the hard at Dagmar's or Sydney or wherever it might be, North Harbor Diesel, the policy still remains in force. The only thing that's been taken off is the navigation.
Okay, good to know. I've interrupted you with questions, but I think you have a few more slides for us.
I do. Yeah. Okay. The three important words: read your policy. The worst time to find your coverage is lacking is when you have a loss, and unfortunately, we've had that more than once. A quick story: gentleman who was a fishing guide bought a vessel out in North Carolina, a 33-foot vessel, had it trucked across from hither to yon, from North Carolina to Oregon. He didn't have some coverage coming across, that is specifically the overland transit coverage. We talked about it. He didn't think he needed it. He moved on smartly. The vessel had an accident. The truck had an accident in Missouri and had some damage to the vessel. And he found out quickly that he didn't have coverage for that, even though he thought he did when I had advised him that he did not. So the second part of that the slide where it's ask the hard questions, have that conversation. Insurance agents are here to answer the questions, to be straight up with the policyholder, to make sure that we agents are doing our due diligence to understand you, your risk, and put the proper coverage in place before a claim occurs.
Okay.
4 points to remember. Mark, you just mentioned a few minutes ago. Read your policy because no one ever does. I do presentations all over Puget Sound, and the first question I ask is, how many of you are boat owners? Bunch of hand goes up. The second question is, how many of you have read your policy? On average, about 80% of those folks drop their hands. They get the policy to meet a certain goal of either getting mortgage or satisfying a loan requirement, and then store it away thinking they have full coverage on everything. Read the policy, and when you read it, it's a legal document. You're going to be confused. So break out your highlighter. Highlight, circle, annotate the pieces that are confusing, then go talk to your agent. My running joke is when you talk to your agent and you ask him, I talked to this guy, Pete, or I listened to this presentation, and he talked about agreed value and pollution and all these different things I'm not aware of. Am I covered? When the agent pats you on the back because you've known him for 20 years and he says, I got your back, you're covered, you're from Missouri. Break out your policy. Make the agent show you in the coverages in the policy document, the Bible. The agent must know what he represents, but more importantly, his verbal doesn't mean anything in a claim situation. It's that policy document. November 2019. Oh, okay. This is something I'm supposed to take out. I'll go and blow through these. We've had some changes in the insuring market over the past several years. I'm not going to go through the whole history because it's very boring, but the net result is that we've had quite a few companies drop out of the insuring game. Premier Marine no longer offers coverages on vessels because they're no longer insuring vessels at all as of May of this year. American Reliable went out. Pantanius went out. Brit RE went out. XL Catlin went out. Falvey Insurance went out, and on and on. The market has definitely turned from where it was just a few years ago. And finally,
This looks like Anacortes.
Anacortes, yes.
Infamous.
Painful.
Yeah.
Well, we know the ending. That's the problem.
Oh, what? Oh. Oh.
Peter, what was the value of that yacht?
I memory serves me correctly, is in the $10 to $11 million range.
I think that's about right.
I left a message on Tom.
So, Peter, who's insurance? Does anybody?
One moment.
No, you need to get people on board. That makes it bad. Another line? Hey, what's that? Get a hammer or something to break up the VIP window.
It can't happen to you.
So, whose insurance was impacted at that point? The people putting the boat in the water, the owner of the boat seeing his baby launched for the first time?
I didn't get into that claims into it, but I understand that American Marine, whose vessel it was, came under their builder's risk policy, and then it was also partly responsible for the launching crew. So that would be, in theory, at least. I didn't get into the
I think it was
minutia of it.
Northern Marine.
Northern Marine, thank you, not American Marine. but there'd be multiple parties involved and lots of letters with lawyer logos and esquires all over them flying back and forth.
Do you know whether it's been settled?
I believe it's been settled. I believe the vessel has been rebuilt and is going back out.
Yeah, we see it here on the Anacortes waterfront, so that's my understanding also.
I do
And
appreciate the
we know
opportunity.
lightning never strikes twice. Even though it could happen to me, it would only happen once.
Peter, any thoughts about nighttime travel or special coverage for traveling at night?
No, there's no delineation between daytime running and nighttime running with regards to the insurance policy. But that's what is lacking so much today. Common sense and prudence would tell you, unless you have, some of the latest high-tech gadgets and whatnot, your basic Mark 1 Mod 0 eyeballs don't work quite as well at night as they do during the day. So slow down, use your available electronic tools, as well as your onboard sensors, such as your hearing and your smells and whatnot, and look out for the safety of the folks on board the vessel first, as well as the vessel, because the property can be replaced, but the people cannot.
Good point. Peter, bringing up fog and traveling at night, are there a lot of claims for log strikes?
There's a term for it called SSO, or striking of a submerged object, which is a very common claim that happens in the Puget Sound because of the way they transport logs, especially up to the north in Canada. So it's not a regular occurrence, but it's a frequent occurrence in the claims world.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat. Is there an advantage to getting additional boating education in regards to the policy costs, Peter?
Yes, there is. The Washington State Boaters Card is where everybody should start, even if they're grandfathered out because of their age. It's good, solid, basic information. Like anything else, to get better at your craft, keeping abreast of the latest and greatest information, such as with the U.S. Power Squadron, U.S. Power Squadron, the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, ASA sailing courses, and if you have the desire going after a U.S. Coast Guard license, Navy for just about 14 years myself, boating since I was 11 years old, now 57. When I got my master's license, I learned incredible amounts of information that I wasn't aware of, and it made me better at what I do in the private pleasure world with my wife every day when we go out.
Yeah, looking
Peter,
at
we've got a really
fatality.
interesting question right here from Anacortes. John asked, what are the pros and cons of changing from a national agent, a Geico, Boat US, to a local regional agent?
Having been on both sides of the coin, as you mentioned, I ran the national program for Geico for 5 years and worked under the agency umbrella, worked with the agents. That local knowledge is invaluable. When you're calling, and I love Geico, they've got a great policy, but when you're calling somebody who is not familiar with what you do or the area of operations and doesn't or won't take the time to have a quick conversation about what your needs are, not just name, address, phone number, but, oh, tell me about your boating experience. And okay, you're going to be at Shoal Bay Marina. Are you going up to Southeast Alaska, or are you an offshore fisherman? Are you going down to the Columbia, up to Portland? That little change makes it's a difference between good and great. And that regional or local agent has a leg up because of their local knowledge and interfacing from that standpoint, as well as the professional relationships they have in the area. If I get a request for insurance, brand new, I'm looking for a surveyor, I'm looking for financial, I'm looking for this, I have people I can point them in that direction to service because I trust them. I know them personally.
Good advice. Good advice. But the coverage is not going to be any different. What you're saying is the personal service you get is going to be so much better with that somebody locally.
Correct. And the coverage can be different. If an agent at XYZ company who is in a bank of sales or underwriters that are under the mandate to put policies on the books without taking the time to ask the right questions. Perfect example, at Geico, I was doing some underwriting review, pulled somebody in, and I said, great policy, looks good. It's a Hunter 45. Why did you rate it with a 75 horsepower diesel outboard?
Okay.
So
That would be unusual.
yes, and that change, it did have a change in the premium because of the fuel type, the propulsion type, the rating criteria is impacted by those two pieces of information.
Interesting. Well, Peter, this has been incredibly informative. And I'm going to be on the phone to my insurance agent tomorrow. I've got some good questions for him. So I hope he's getting a good night's rest tonight. And then if he doesn't answer them right, I'll be calling an agent like yourself. No, I'm kidding, but this is really good advice.
Peter, what's your email address? I'll put it in the chat box.
My email address is peter@novamar.net.
Great.
That makes it easy. That's great.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for preparing this presentation for us and taking time out of your Thursday night to join us. And we really appreciate it on behalf of our audience.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's very near and dear to me. I do believe that insurance is boring. It's like watching paint dry, but it's my career, my profession. I do have a passion for it. And it's not about insuring boats. It's making sure folks have the right coverage, because I love the fact that when I jumped into this 2 decades ago, I've made some phenomenal friends from the folks that we've insured, been all over the United States with them. And it's opened up a whole new avenue of life for my wife and I.
Fantastic. Well, we're glad there's quality people like you in the business. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, sir. We'll talk to you shortly.
Yep. And that, Peter, Peter Schrappen, that about
Yeah,
wraps
here.
us up.
It does, certainly. Episode 23, Louise Lasser, Mark, you know that name, Louise Lasser?
No, you got me on that one.
Yeah, I didn't. Preservation Hall Jazz Band was the musical guest. I know them; they're a talented group. And I was doing a little research on this topic tonight. Lloyd's of London. Do you know how they got their name?
From Mr. Lloyd.
There you go. God, you're good, Mark. Nothing gets by you. Edward Lloyd's ran a coffee shop, and there were 80 coffee houses in London in the 1660s within this 1 square mile area of the ancient Roman walls. And people would go there for specialized insurance. And Mr. Lloyd, Edward Lloyd, I think he carried maritime insurance.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
that is interesting.
What can you say? I have a trivia question. I'll see if I can share my screen. Let's see. 1 second. Yes. Okay, here we go. We're going to share this. What do the red lines indicate on the map of the United States of America? What do the red lines indicate?
Those look like railroad lines.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, warm. Yeah, I'll give it to you. Amtrak lines. It's the Amtrak lines.
Yeah.
How about that? Now that's a trivia question you could not Google. I mean,
They all go to Chicago.
There you go.
The center. Yeah.
All railroads lead to Chicago. So I do like a Roman thing there, Mark.
Yeah, it
well,
is.
Cool. What's on tap for next week?
I thought you'd never ask. We've got next week, we're going back to a subject that we covered a couple of weeks ago, but a whole advanced level of that, and that's AIS. We're going to have Doug Miller from Miltech back with us, and he's going to talk to us about a new product that's come out called Cortex. And Leonard and I, and Lorena, we got involved with this. It's a product that we forked over the money and have put it on our boat. So we're going to be talking from personal experience. It's very innovative. It's combining AIS together with VHF along with boat monitoring, and just fabulous engineering that they've put into this device. And Doug will be here to tell you all about it. And Leonard and I have tons of questions. And so that'll be next week. And then
Well, I was going to say, at least I have just barely enough experience with it now to exactly as Mark put it, ask a ton of questions.
Yeah, yeah. And then we're lining up our next couple of weeks, and I'll give a preview to December.
Please.
We're going to have some local boating celebrities, and they're probably watching tonight.
Oh boy.
But Sean and Elizabeth from the Motor Vessel Freedom, if you've looked at their YouTube videos, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it. This cruising couple from Seattle are out cruising all over, working from their boat and able to blend their liveaboard lifestyle with their careers and visit fabulous places. The videos are very nicely produced, and they're going to join us on December 10th. We're also going to be starting a series within our series to talk to legends of Puget Sound and the boating area. And we're going to talk to some of the famous people that we've heard about. We're planning to get, we're hoping to get Carl Sutter from Fisheries. A lot of people may wonder, how did these businesses start? And they're terrific businesses. We already have lined up Bud Gould, the force behind Anthony's Restaurants that we find in so many of our marinas. And we're going to be bringing on more and more people of the legends
Awesome.
of Puget Sound.
That gets to this was not planned, but this gets to my other favorite book, Mark. What should I do with my life? I always like asking people how they ended up getting their callings in life. So I will be sure to ask those household names. Good stuff.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And by the way, if any of you have ideas of shows that you would like us to do, subjects you'd like us to dig into, send us an email, either Peter at NMTA or myself at the Wagner Guide, and we'll be happy to discuss it deeper and create a show. And you may be a celebrity also, or a knowledgeable person, and we'd love to have you on the show. We've got a lot of interesting people in this area.
Good stuff. Well, AIS, that we're blessed and cursed to have a lot of abbreviations. That could be a good topic too. Aquatic invasive species also would be an AIS abbreviation. That would be.
Oh, do we have to talk about aquatic invasive species?
Buzzkill?
Yeah.
I got a haircut for today, Mark. How's it looking?
It's looking good, Peter.
I got my
It's
locks
looking
looking excellent. I appreciate that. You meant that. I could tell.
appreciate you sharing that.
Can I expense that? All right, folks, that's all we got for tonight. Thanks. Have a great evening out there. Thanks for watching.
And Peter.
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Thanks for joining us.